As Alex described earlier on, there's a clear link between the circular economy and design thinking. And that's really what I wanted to talk to you about today. I love stories, and I'm going to tell you a few stories about some companies in South Africa, local companies that we're working with that are currently implementing sound circular economy, sustainable practices into their value chain. So to kick this off, I'm going to tell you the first story. So there's a company here locally that started out by engaging in very traditional South African waste management practices. And what does that mean? Essentially, it means that most of their waste went to a landfill site. And in case you're curious, that's not a good thing. So the way that, by the way, if you want to laugh in between, that's good too. So the way that it actually worked is that they started to realize that there must be a better way to engage. There must be a much more environmentally responsible way to engage. And that's exactly what they started to do. And unbeknownst to them, they started to use design thinking principles in addressing their issue. It turns out that they're in the middle of nowhere, well, not really the middle of nowhere, but they're outside of a major metropole, which means that recyclers are not close by, and they're not so keen to come out all the way to where you are just to come and collect your waste. So what did they do? They started to analyze their data, their waste. They started to collect data. They wanted to know how much waste are they generating, what kind of waste is out there, how much of each kind was there, and where was it being generated and why. And using this, they were able to do two key things. The first one is that they were able to set up a waste tendering system to arrange for their waste to be recycled. And the second is that they set up a system to be able to adequately identify where the waste was coming from and to improve their processes. So I realized that this doesn't sound particularly sexy just yet. However, if I tell you that by shifting their traditional waste management system to a full waste economy, last year they generated revenue of approximately 1 million rand just from selling their waste, I think it's starting to sound a lot sexier now. So that's fantastic. And so that's the part where we say to ourselves, this is great work. We're preventing waste from going to landfill and we're starting to recycle. And now it's time for me to tell you the second story. So the second story is the part that we don't often talk about, and that is what happens to the material after we recycle it. How many companies are out there and how many products do you own that truly contain recycled content? Think about it for a second. So this is the story of a big brand owner who decided that they wanted to have a positive impact on the environment and save some money at the same time. And so they started on this mission about preventing or reducing the amount of plastic waste going to landfill. So they decided to start looking at including recycled content in their packaging. And that sounds fantastic, except that the reality is much harder than you would possibly imagine. Because here's the thing, if you're a big brand owner, the volume that you're looking for is quite different. The quality and the technical requirements that are needed can make it quite a complex process. So how do you go about doing it? And this for them means looking into the value chain. How can you start ensuring that you have guaranteed supply? So for the uninitiated, a value chain is when you start looking into your supply chain, but identifying the areas that are providing you with specific value for your product. And that's what they did. They started to look at, if we're going to have recycled content in our packaging, we need this amount, we need this quality, how are we going to go about doing it? So they started mapping out their value chain, understanding what was out there, what was the gaps, how to actually go about closing the gaps, and that's how they were able to actually address the point of guaranteed supply. So for this one, sorry, I just realized I forgot to tell you something. So for the first story is about Sea Harvest, a fish processing company out in Saldanha. And if you want to know more details about that, please go to our website, and the full detailed example and some really cool videos can be found over there. For the second one, the big brand owner plans to make an announcement later this year in terms of which of their product lines it's going into and how they've gone about doing this. And this is a really big deal because you cannot underestimate enough the amount that goes in there in terms of reputation, but also to ensure that you have guaranteed supply for this packaging, because we're talking about tens of thousands of bottles, and it's a very big deal. So they'll make a formal announcement later in the year, and shortly after that, you'll be able to find the case study on our website as well. So all of this is good and well, and now comes the part of how do we start engaging? What is it that we can do to take this further? Is it truly enough? So a few weeks ago, I was quite fortunate to attend the Sustainable Brands Conference in Cape Town. And I attended a particular presentation by David Thompson from a company called Agua in Costa Rica. And that's when I started to realize that there's such a strong link between circular economy concepts and design. So this is where his story goes and where I heard the idea of the infinite economy the first time. So what David actually did was he started working on, or what Agua does is that they have, or they sell bottled water. Sounds simple enough. But specifically what they've done is that they've designed the plastic bottle in a particular way for its next life use. And what they do is that once you consume the product, you have the packaging available, and the next life is that it's actually converted into a roof tile with all the necessary properties that you have as far as a normal standard roof tile goes. And this is the fantastic part of it, is that when you start looking at all of these ideas, you realize that when you're designing a product, it doesn't have to actually be just for this lifetime, but it needs to be designed to take its next life and the life after that into account, which David at Agua has successfully done. From our side, it is something that we see happening with nature, and we've engaged with nature a number of ways in terms of how to go about addressing this, looking at what the product is at the moment, what it could be in the next stage, and the stages after that. But together with this, I have to say that there are quite a number of valuable lessons that we've come across when working in the circular economy space or with value chains. And that is that you can't go it alone. It's truly one of these moments where it is much easier and better to go further much faster by working together. Sorry, I've totally messed that up. Would you mind if I say it again? I wrote it down so beautifully. You can go further much faster together. So that should not be underestimated. One of the key things that we found is that working in this space is really about the power of collaboration. It truly is. This is one of the things that I've recognized, is that it's bringing in a lot of design elements, but it really is unlocking the power of working together. We found this in terms of our projects of what works successfully and what doesn't, and the strongest element is trust and being able to rely on each other. So to round things up, I'd like to invite you to design our tomorrow together. Thank you very much.